And hello, everybody. Welcome to WD Carousel of Podcast. My name's Crystal.
And I'm Ian.
And I introduced this one.
I know. And that's technically correct, even though it's
correct.
strange.
I know.
Correct.
It's the reason what we're kind of thrown off is because this is actually an episode that doesn't have to do with the parks, but it has to do with the Walt Disney World property.
Yeah.
So throwing you off a little bit here.
Yeah.
But what we're going to talk about today is Celebration.
Yeah, Celebration Florida, which is kind of a unique place in terms of just like what it is, what it was supposed to be, what it is now. Like, just it's just interesting.
Disney's first attempt at creating a community.
Yeah.
Like an actual, not just Walt's imagination of Epcot,
right.
the original Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, but the actual fruition of
some sort of master planned community
a
that
plot
Disney
of land
built. Yeah. So I guess we can just plow right into it, huh?
Let's do it.
So interestingly, so I wasn't sure when they had started making it, but I didn't think it was the 90s, but I should have guessed in the early 90s.
Okay, before we get back there, let's do a little bit of history, because I mean I made reference to Disney, Walt specifically, his original concept of the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Yep. And it was supposed to be the city of the future. In his original concept, they would have about 20,000 rotating residents and embracing futuristic technologies.
Right.
In 1984, when Eisner and Frank Wells became CEO and COO, they inherited, quote unquote, the land that is Walt Disney World. And they wanted to figure out a long-term plan for the property before Florida tried to eminent domain it and take it back because of non-use. So the plans had been in place or started since the mid 80s.
Yeah. So it was the southern area part of the property, and it's still part of the Reedy Creek Development District and all of that stuff, but they just didn't do anything with it. But it didn't really start to become a real concept, like a real physical thing, until the early 90s, with just kind of more early on stuff happening prior to that. And they had, at the time, it was called the Disney Development Company, which, of course, at some point they were like, this is ridiculous, this is basically just Imagineering, and they made it one company. So Disney Development Company and Walt Disney Imagineering became one company a little after that. And then they created the Celebration Company to take this southern portion of the district.
Yeah, because it's on the other side of the highway too. So it's not actually on the same side of the highway as the amusement parks are and the resorts are.
Right.
It's
they just had it
segregated.
Yeah. It's like, so there was roads that kind of went through, and it was really close, but it's like not super helpful for park stuff. So,
but it's Disney owned.
Exactly. And so Eisner's just like smelling an opportunity here.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
We already know that Eisner, we really need to do an episode on Eisner.
We really should. I mean, we keep going Eisner.
We keep bashing him and bad-mouthing him, but he did amazing work for the company.
Things. Yeah.
But he was all about the money.
Yes.
He was a dollars and cents kind of guy. And what he saw were a whole bunch of dollar signs sitting across the highway that weren't being used, and he wanted to utilize them. So he decided that he was going to get into this development company, and under the, auspicious phrasing of bring Walt's Epcot to life, got into this neo-traditionalism / new urbanism sort of kick, which brings communities. He wanted to bring communities back together more like the 1950s instead of the 80s and 90s, where plots of land have been getting bigger, people have been separating from their neighbors more, and they don't talk to each other, and they have to drive to the store, and they want to have a more centralized location, and they weren't going to have like backyards for people to hide in, and just all this other silliness.
Right. Very much in the same realm. Yeah, exactly.
Forced to socialize with your neighbors.
Yes. in the same realm as how Walt kind of felt about Epcot, where it was very closely knit but focused on being a forward thinking community. It was very much in that vein. That, yeah, like you said, the new urbanism thing was sort of the idea. I don't. Yeah, it is funny that, yeah, because he was pushing everybody at Disney for that, like being like, hey, this needs to be like the basic idea of Epcot, like kind of pushing that whole
Yeah.
concept.
So I mean, they made their 1991 announcement that they were going to do this.
Right, right. And so, of course, since it's Disney, they brought in like renowned architects and architecture and planning firms from across the country to do different aspects of it. So the number of big ones, Cooper Robinson and Partners, Robert A.M. Stern, they did like master planning for layout, and then landscaping was EDOT of San Francisco. They became a different company later. And there were a number of other ones, and then independent buildings even where they brought in architects like Michael Graves, who we know did stuff for the Swan and Dolphin, um, Philip Johnson, Charles Moore. There was a bunch of them. They came in and built these buildings, especially in downtown, that were these kind of unique one-off, unique buildings. So it was kind of a they kind of went all in. Like,
Oh
if
yeah.
Disney was going to do a planned out downtown, they were going to build it at the same quality level as they were going to build their
Yeah, I
parks,
mean,
which
they
is what
wanted
they
this to
did.
be like a living Main Street USA. They wanted to have like connections to the Disney Institute, which is a whole nother thing, which we're not going to talk about
Yeah.
the Disney Institute. But they had their own like schooling, and they were going to do a
Yep.
K-12 program that was going to be new and experimental form of education. They had 6 different types of housing options, like
Yep.
design options,
Yep.
and you can't share like a property line with the same like image. So if you decided to go with like the Georgian, you can't have another Georgian right next to you. Um, but that way it gave more diversity, and it gave the feeling of the story being built and how it wasn't just the same, cookie cutter house over and over and over again.
Right. Right. Yeah, and so in terms of and with master planning, they consulted with both experts in the mental and physical health fields, and they were trying to figure out, like, wanted to have this like health focused, holistic health focus on for residents, and so they went and they created a lot of it was mental, to be honest,
Hmm.
mental health, and they went through it's like physical health things. It's like, oh, just like go exercise or something, but like you could do that anywhere. That wasn't what was interesting for them. They were interested in what the focus on mental health would look like, and that was why they created so many green spaces. So
Yeah,
they
I mean,
just
they were
built in
looking at
integral green spaces into everything.
a whole health
Yeah,
story. That's one of
yeah,
the reasons why they wanted to go back to this neo traditionalism, where the town center was close enough for you to walk to
yeah,
instead
yep,
of having to get into your car and drive. It was within like actual walking distance,
right,
and not, an unattainable sort of location. They even have
right,
like water fountains, they have movie theaters, they have a pond, they have all of this stuff that is just beautiful to help with the
yeah,
mental health
mental
of
health.
people, the imagery that Disney loves, and just to give the overall look that they were going
Yeah,
for.
yeah, and that's a good point with the because that kind of falls into the whole villages thing. They have, and there's quite a few of them, and I'm not going to go through all of them because
It
you
would just
get
be
the
listing at
idea.
that point in time.
It'd be listing them out like there's no point. So
We're
the
not
main
selling
one
real
would
estate
be
here.
right, exactly. Or are we?
Mm.
The main one is called Celebration Village. Obviously, is the one that has the main downtown. But the idea of having these different villages creates these enclaves where you can have central things happening in each of them, which is all part of that new urbanism where you have the ability to walk to things, and you don't have to get in your car every time you do something. It makes it these enclaves are kind of more connected, and it's supposed to improve the well-being of the people who live there. So that's kind of why they kind of did those little segments out and create these little villages underneath the whole thing.
Hmm. And they
um
also gave a good
yeah,
variety of different like housing styles too. So it wasn't just
yeah,
for, the elite rich, just like Golden Oaks is right now.
right,
But they
right.
had everything
They
from apartment complexes to.
Right. And that was the whole thing. So they had it's a good point. They had
Yeah.
a condos, and they used to have some that were apartments as well. So like these condos are kind of like multi-bedroom apartments, but there's no rentals anymore. They got rid of the rentals. So you have to just buy the real estate, and so you can go and get a condo where you can. It's like basically just a condo with a garage that's somewhere else in the building. That you can go step up to a townhouse, 2 or 3 story kind of thing, and then they've got like a duplex or a triplex. They call it like an attached bungalow, where it's like it looks like
It's
a
kind of what I
bungalow, but
live in
it's
right now.
split. Yeah, it's split into multiple.
Hmm.
And then the bungalow is then just a small single family dwelling. Garden home is a step up. I always think of Garden View from, or like the little garden ones. But where is that? Is that Key West? Old Key West? No, or is
There's a
that Grand Floridian?
no. You're thinking, oh,
That's
what
Old
is
Key
it?
West, isn't it?
Boardwalk.
Boardwalk. Whew,
Boardwalk.
that was killing me.
Yeah,
Okay.
the clown pool.
Um, the clown pool. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Moving
But yes, the
on.
garden homes. Moving on, garden homes
Get rid of that
are
nightmare.
a right step up from the bungalows, and they can have up to about 2,100 square feet. So they're turning into kind of like a more moderate sized house. Cottage homes are a step up from that. They can be more than 3,000 square feet. Then the village homes are like they're kind of like I would call those like the McMansions, where they're like
Yeah.
a big home. So like they're the biggest home you can get that's like a standard, like they call it stock, like a standard floor plan that's not custom built for the resident. And then above that, then you get or you get manor homes, which are somewhere in between, and then the state homes, which are
Manor
custom.
homes.
So like right, and
Manor
once you get to
homes
an
and
estate
estate
home,
homes. Those are
homes,
my bread and
what?
butter. Bread and butter.
Yes, yes,
So
indeed.
when they first started selling these properties, one of the unique things about this was there was no negotiation in regards to the cost of the home, whereas
Right,
right now even you're able to kind of negotiate with the seller to see if you want to, include closing costs or knock it down a couple
right,
thousand or whatever. There was a cut and dry cost, and there were so many people that were interested. They actually had to have a lottery set up in place for the first
yeah,
350 homes and 150
wow,
apartments to be able to make sure that they were given out
yeah,
fairly.
right,
Now, that being
right.
said, this sounds great, this sounds amazing, but
There's always a dark side.
practicality happened. Okay, so in 1996, they officially opened, okay? At that
Yep.
point in time, because of all the third parties that had worked on building the properties and the time constraint and them from being out of state and not really having a relationship yet with subcontractors in the area and a whole bunch of myriad of other things, um the houses were not that good. um I mean, it went to
Right.
the point of the speedy construction being so bad that there were outlets that weren't working in houses, leaky roofs, moldy
Oh
walls,
god.
to the point of where they had in 1999 an independent inspection of the homes, and of all the homes that were built, 70 of them did not have roofs up to code
Whoa.
and needed to have brand new roofs to meet the industry standards. I mean, also the housing boom at the same time that was happening in the Orlando area took a lot of the, you know, subcontractors and the people that were building homes working in other locations. So the third party companies that Disney had hired to build this area were unavailable. So they
Right.
were just working with no names because they had hands,
Right. Oh my
which
god.
is kind of a scary thing, especially when people are putting the money out there to have Disney. I mean, Disney put their name
Right.
on this. They wanted
Right.
the Main Street USA houses, and that's what they were doing. I
Right.
mean, in the 1996 time period when they were going through and selling the homes. Now, you and I are going to laugh about it because we own our own home. But at that
Right.
point in time, the houses were going for about $125,000 as the base.
Hmm.
But 1996, that is super expensive.
Yeah.
And the dream of this area was supposed to be like Epcot. It was supposed to be, accessible. It was supposed to have like a mix of the lower and higher income groups. That way it's not like
Right.
this area is the, rich part of town and this area is the low income part of town. But they
Right.
had diversity between the buildings and everything to make a more unified community. And
Right.
instead, what had happened is like 20% over average for the cost of the at the time to even make a home, whereas what these
Right.
houses were selling for.
Right.
And
Right.
then just because of that, obviously, the economic disparity that happened between the people that
Mhm.
were able to actually afford the houses versus living there. I mean,
Mhm.
the median household income that was there at the time was double the rest of Orlando that was living in that one little area. 80% of it was white.
Yep.
I mean, they're talking about people who worked there at the restaurants and the movie theaters not actually even being able to live there
Right.
because the cost was so severe due
Which,
to making
yeah.
up the cost with the third parties and this and that and just everything
Right.
else.
And which is funny because like the entire concept of the original Epcot design was it was kind of almost self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
So like it doesn't make any sense if you're like it basically just becomes the millionaire's playground again when you can't even have the people who
Exactly.
work there live there,
But
which
the
turned into a whole
problem
problem.
between the two is that Epcot had the revolving um,
Yes.
households, so it was only
Yep.
a rental situation. Here, they
Right.
were selling. So once you sell a property, they were done
Yep.
with it. And
Yep.
as properties kept being sold more and more and more, Disney's actual ownership and stock in the location kept going down and down and down.
Which was by design.
Yeah, because they wanted to make sure that they were making their money off of it. Let's be honest,
Right.
because
Right.
I
Well,
mean
and the
that's
the
what
goal
Eisner
was
did.
to plan it out and then kind of divest and then let it become self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Which,
Um, Talking a little bit about the school that they had
yeah.
built. So
Yeah.
they wanted to do like this new and innovative teaching style. And so they actually, whereas most classrooms at that point in time had like 20 kids to one teacher, they had
Yeah.
80 kids to three teachers in a mixed grade classroom.
That just
And
seems lazy. I don't know. That seems weird.
and each of the like report cards were like more detailed assessments than the normal A B C
Mhm.
D F.
Right.
And honestly, what they attribute the failure of that to was trying to do too many of the new techniques at once instead of
Right.
doing one or two, because the
Yeah.
staff of that school started out at only 19 teachers and within the first year 6 of them quit
Oh, geez.
due
Okay.
to the amount of stress and everything.
Yeah.
Year one, they
Yeah.
had 200 students. Year two, because they had to open it up to the greater area around there, they had
Sure.
900 students and they did not have enough
Oh,
staff.
no.
And it was
Yeah.
just one hit after another, to the point of where like Disney started having lots of regret having their name associated with
Attached to that.
this, especially
Yeah.
when, they're advertising themselves as the, dream area, the perfect city, the, best area to raise your family in. And in 1998, just like any other city, they have their first armed home invasion.
Oh, no.
And then same year, they also had their first death due to a car accident. So,
Oh,
I mean, it's no
no.
longer just like the city that you and I live in. Oh, there's
Right.
another, somebody had a car accident. No, Disney's Celebration had a car accident.
Car accident. Right.
Disney's
When you put such a high
Celebration had the
profile
blah, 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 blah,
name.
blah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. In this world that is, and if you look at pictures of the place, it like looks weirdly immaculate, like you would expect. And yeah, it is very interesting.
Yep.
Um,
So it was 2003 that Disney finally decided to divest from the Celebration location
right.
and sell off their ownership of the Main Street stores.
Yes.
So the company that did end up purchasing it from them, I believe it was Lexan Capital,
Yep.
if I
I
remember
saw that.
correctly.
Yep.
They purchased the area, the Main Street area, for $42 million,
Mm,
and had a caveat underneath there that still had to say they needed to uphold the same design and the same
right.
building standards that Disney had originally wanted to implement
Right.
when they first came up with this concept.
And that's actually called the pattern book. So I was talking about those architecture firms early on that had put everything together as part of that master plan that was called the pattern book. And because you can build your own property there, or you can update or whatever to your homes, but they had to follow these very specific guidelines based on what the style of your home was designated to be, based on where you were, and a bunch of other rules. And it was this kind of like this like weird little volume of information that you had to follow, which is not unusual for a planned community, but it
Mm-hmm.
was certainly interesting that they had a very strict one for them.
Yeah. You also have some other trivia thingy me bobbers.
I do, yeah. So, and as you said, they Disney started to divest most of like the actual real. What am I trying to say? Retail and all that kind of stuff that they originally had control of. They do have still, even though that they've been trying to divest and get their name out of it, they are they're still somewhat of a majority land owner of or a landholder of the properties there. So
Mm-hmm.
they do still have a lot of presence there, but they're very quiet about it. So because though that they kind of spun it off, it is no longer technically part of Disney, and
Mm-hmm.
they consider it to be part of the Orlando Kissimmee metro area. And so in 2010, it was about 7,400 people that lived there. And it's not actually a town. That's the other thing that I thought was interesting was it's not incorporated. So it's more
No.
like the villages, like in Florida, where it's like a retirement community. It's incorporated the same way. Where in most parts of the country they call it like a census designated place, but in Florida they call it more specifically a community development district. Stuff, zoning,
Mm-hmm.
words, jargon.
I mean, in every
Um,
state's slightly different. So if we're
Different,
trying
yeah.
to explain what was, what they have down there versus what we have up here in
It's a little
Minnesota,
different.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're not going to be able to understand.
No, no, and but most of the country census designated place makes sense. That would pretty much carry over.
Mm-hmm.
But because of this, the way that that's laid out, and this is true in Florida, and I think it's true in a lot of places too. There's no mayor or city council. So basically,
Mm-hmm.
the way it works is you've got all landowners are basically voting on policy directly, which is both kind of
it's,
cool, but also not always super
it's
functional.
good and it's bad, especially when you're
Yeah,
talking about Disney.
Disney's, because as we had mentioned before, Disney is also still somewhat of a majority landowner, so they actually have a lot of control over it.
Not as much when it comes
Regardless.
to the Celebration property, but definitely for like Golden Oaks. Golden
Well, right, and
Oaks.
that's definitely a separate thing. But apparently, even with Celebration, they still have control. But I don't think that they like use it. I think overall, it's used by
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly just the people that do stuff there. But apparently, they do still have they are the largest landholding entity within the Celebration Incorporated property area. That's something that I found. I don't know if that's still true, but as of the time that I found that information, that
Mm-hmm.
was true.
Yeah. All I
Um,
know is
yeah,
that in the total like situation that had to do with Celebration and the sales of properties and selling homes and selling
yeah.
the, town square center area and all of that, Disney actually made a profit of $550 million.
Woo!
So, I mean, Eisner,
Dang.
we bash him a lot,
So
but
is that net? Is that net profit?
yes.
Wow, that
So
is amazing.
that shows how much they were able to capitalize on the Disney brand to keep interested parties such as, you know, I'm pointing to myself. If I could afford to live in Celebration, I
Right,
probably
right,
would, especially since they've worked all the kinks out at this point in time.
right, right.
But, to be able to live in a Disney main street in a Disney,
Right.
idolized world
Right.
would
Is
be
kind of
amazing.
enticing for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and though Disney is no longer really a retailer, or not in any majority stuff, um, they are still, you do still have to interact with them to a certain degree because of the fact that they are, Celebration is still more or less part of the Reedy Creek Improvement District.
Mm-hmm.
You have like your utilities, so like your power and telecom internet
Water.
stuff are water, yeah, are all operated by Disney because you're getting it from the same place that the parks do. So Smart City Telecom and Reedy Creek Energy Services
Yeah, that's something
are
that we didn't even
actually,
bring up when they were first making the homes. They wanted to have fiber optics, and they wanted to
yeah,
they were the first ones to have, like, we want to have an in-house video option for like movie rentals and downloads and basically
right,
Netflix now. And so they
right.
were having all of these
That was
ideas
like the late
like
'80s.
the mid 90s.
Yeah,
And they're like, we're going
yeah,
to make these houses tech ready for all of this
yeah,
stuff that 2020 we are thriving on because we need.
right. Right. So if they and so do you know for sure that they lay fiber
They
that whole
did.
property then?
They
Okay,
did.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
A lot of Florida actually did lay fiber. So fun fact, Florida is one of the most inexpensive places to get internet because they have such a good fiber network. Just that's a
Jealous.
separate thing. I know. Ridiculous, but and meanwhile Minnesota we're stuck with terrible internet, but that's a separate problem.
And
But
winters.
in winters. Well, there is that. There is
We're
that.
not gonna compare the two
Yeah.
because you guys have Disney, you guys don't have winters, you guys have fiber
Yes.
optic, you guys have
You're you can do your thing.
no
We're
like state taxes come out of your
right,
income.
right.
I mean, just
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and then so
stop that.
the last kind of thing here is, and we had brought this up briefly. Celebration is not Golden Oaks,
Mm-hmm.
which is its own separate thing. Which
Yep.
actually, I thought it was much older than it is, and it's not. It's 2011 is when the first
Yeah,
properties hit the
Golden Oaks
market.
is actually a fairly new property. They started out with
Yeah,
Celebration, and then they went to Bay Lake, and they also did Buena Vista.
yeah,
And Golden Oaks is the most recent incarnation of Disney trying to make, you know, properties.
right, right. And these are
Those who
no
can
beating around the bush here. These
afford
are
$11 million
multi-million,
houses.
yeah, multi-million dollar properties,
But
with a lot of
literally sharing a wall with Magic Kingdom.
Kingdom. Almost all of these properties, you can see the fireworks show every night.
God.
Like that is
We'll
the
have to do
level you're
another
at with
episode on
these.
that because just
Yeah,
the stuff that
yeah. There's a
comes with a
lot
Golden
there,
Oaks property, yes, it's $11 million.
but there's a lot of stuff you get that's pretty amazing.
But I won't say.
Yeah, but
But
not for
yeah, so if you wanted to move down to Celebration, I do know that they are still even building to this day. They have
yeah,
new areas and regions that are opening up, so you can go ahead and make a purchase, especially since a lot of the kinks are now worked out.
yeah.
So
So yeah. Well, that is Celebration, Florida, a
celebration.
census designated area.
So
Yeah.
this has been WD Carousel of Podcast. My name's Crystal,
And I'm Ian.
and we hope you have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. Bye, everybody.